just want to do a sound check quickly, if someone can let me know if I'm coming through clear. Okay, seems like the sound is working. I'll give it like just a minute or two for anyone else to join, and then we'll get going. Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on GIS. My name is Werner. I'm the lead developer on the product. Our GIS solution has been around for a while now. It's gone through a couple of iterations as we've figured out better ways to provide more value using the solution. Currently we're on version 3. It's available as a licensed add-on to any of our Smart GIS map servers. Version 10.04 and above 4.04 for maps. So today I'm just going to provide an overview of the GIS system and how it relates to and adds value to your SCADA. I'll also go through the basics really quickly, since it's pretty straightforward. I won't spend too much time on this. Then we're going to take a more detailed look at our advanced features and how they can really add some extra pop to your project. So a geographic information system, GIS, is a simple way of displaying data related to specific positions on the Earth's surface to allow one to more easily understand their patterns and relationships. It provides more context to geographically dispersed data. This then represents an opportunity to optimize and plan activity accordingly. It can also assist in tracing root causes of certain events or issues. So for a couple of use cases, the most obvious being asset tracking, especially in South Africa. Knowing where your assets are when they're moving and also where they end up can be important to curb losses due to theft. These use cases are typically more concerned with the location of the asset. Another common case is for mobile operations, where it's not only the location that's relevant, but also its operational values. It's then also useful to add GIS to any geographically dispersed operation, even where the assets tend to be static, because their location could still be important. Any distributed network like water and power, logistics, or even just geographically larger sites like mines or farms can benefit from getting a geographic overview of their operation. Lastly, Adroit's GIS provides the option of Cartesian coordinates, that is XY instead of latitude and longitude, which allows you to get the same benefits as above, just on a smaller scale, like inside a building or perhaps inside a mine shaft where GPS locations are more or less irrelevant. Okay, so for our basic configuration, the GIS solution can be set up in two parts. The first being the actual map control that gets placed on the form. Here we need to set up where the map tiles are retrieved from, as well as the basic look and feel of the map control. I'm going to just take you through the tile setup here on this slide because they won't show up in my streaming software. Basically, I'm just referring to the map provider and map type. You get a choice of 3 map providers, OpenStreetMaps being an open source one on the internet. You can configure Bing Maps if you're lucky enough to have a license for it. And then we've got our local map provider, which is for use in cases where you can't have access to the internet. We can pre-render a set of map tiles for a given area that you can then use to display in an offline mode. If we switch to our demonstration, then you'll see I've got my map here. I've set up from the Smart Tag, I've set up the map provider and map type. And if we just run this as it is, you'll see it loads the map centered at 0, 0, and zoomed quite far out. I think this is zoom level 4 by default. If we want to just improve our UI a little bit, we'll go to the properties, set the startup zoom level to something more relevant, let's say 10, and our startup location will make something like minus 27 and 26, should be somewhere in South Africa. If we then run that, then you'll see we're at a more detailed zoom level, and we're centered in, this is like Rustenburg somewhere, Klerksdorp. Alright, now that we've got our map set up, we need to set up the data source side. I've already added a Web 1 GIS data source, so now we'll just go ahead and add our first node to that GIS item, to that data source. Just bring up that dialog. Okay, so this is what our GIS node configuration dialog looks like. Firstly, you're going to want to enter a name for this node. For this test case, I'm just going to enter item 1. We'll gloss over some of these until the advanced section. Let's statically define the location for this asset. Let's put it straight in the middle of our map control. We'll configure its visible range. So this is the range of zoom levels where this pin will be visible. So I'm going to make it visible from level 6 down to level 10. And we'll also set its default zoom level to 10. That's the zoom level that the map will automatically jump to when navigating to this pin. You'll see on the right hand side here, there's an option to show or hide the pin. You typically hide the pin if you're configuring a hierarchy only node that you're just using for logical grouping of your nodes. Then, as far as the basics go, we also have an option to pick a color and a custom icon for each pin. Okay, so now we've got our new pin available in our data source, item 1, and we want to view it on our map. So we just go ahead and select our Web 1 GIS data source that we just configured, save that, and we run the form, and we see that our pin is placed exactly where we wanted it, and we also have the node available in the tree on the left hand side. Another bit of functionality to point out is the filter box. When this list of available pins gets quite large, it can be difficult to find the asset that you're looking for. So here you can just type maybe the start of the word that you know, and it'll find it. You'll see if I type something that's not there, it wildcards to the entire string. So Tim it will find, but Tim2 it won't. Okay, so another thing to add here is just about those zoom levels that we configured. You'll remember we start up at zoom level 10 on this map now, and that's where this pin is still visible. If we start zooming out, it remains visible until we hit less than level 6, then the pin disappears. This can be used to cut down on cases where you've got too many pins where the data starts actually getting lost. You can provide different pins at higher zoom levels that provide more summatorial data. Okay, and I think that about does it for the basic config. Let's go back to the slides. What's going on here? Okay, so for the advanced features, I thought I'd give some context by putting it into a use case. So let's say that I've got a business that rents out potable water tankers. I just have the basic requirement that I want to know when a tank is running low and needs to be replenished. We want to make sure that our customers rent from their nearest branch to cut down on overheads. And let's say we've also had an issue with theft. So we want to track when these tankers move. So we've asked the customers to arrange with their branch whenever they plan to move the tanker or when they return it. Then we can track the fact that they're validly moving the tanker in a digital, and then alarm the tankers when they move without being put into this transporting state. Alright, so each of these requirements for this scenario we'll address with some of the advanced features in GIS. We'll just start by hooking up a template graphic form so we can take a look at our tank values. Then we'll hook up the pin to the dynamic GPS data coming from the simulation. We'll set up some geofences around that location. In our scenario, this geofence will be around the end customer's spot where he wants the tanker deployed. Once we've got the geofence set up, we'll add some alarm indication for both the tank level and the tanker location. Then lastly, we'll take a look at some of the extra value adds, especially around node descriptors that we've also got available. If we switch back to our demo setup, then you'll see I've already created another GIS data source for this part of the demo, and we'll be configuring tanker 2. I've just configured it with a name, nothing else has been set up yet, so we can go on with setting up the open graphic form behavior. So the templates work pretty much the same as in the on the graphic form, open graphic form behavior. You define a graphic form that you want to open, set up any or put in any substitutions for the aliases that the form has. So we would browse for our template. It's got an alias called TID. I know it needs to be _002. And if we finish that and switch back to our operator, let me just save this first. We can head to the operator. Then if we navigate to our tanker 2, which will be up at 0, 0, if we double click that, we get our template. Let me just add it here quickly. With the value substituted and everything filled in correctly. So let me just hide this guy. So if I just go back to the designer, next we're just going to have to hook up our pin to some dynamic location data. If we go back and edit the pin, so at the location we can now tick that it must be driven by data element. We then that just pops up a data element browser where you browse in your coordinate agent. Okay, it'll bring back the current value of that coordinate agent immediately. After doing that, because we've got the coordinate agent configured, we can then set up our geofence as well. So geofence simply defines the safe area for your asset. It can be defined as either a radius around a single point or as a polygon. We're going to set it up as a radius in this example. You also get two levels of fences, both warning and alarm, pretty much like high and high alarms. For our use case scenario, you could use the warning fence to start an action where the call center calls the user and asks whether he just forgot to report that he's moving the asset. And then if the alarm fence triggers, they can just go ahead and dispatch the police immediately. And let me just see where the center is. So we'll set this up to be at 800 meters and 1,000 meters away from the center point respectively. Make sure that's written down. And then also in this case we want to see where our fence lies. So we tick the show alarm fence. This will only show the alarm fence, not the warning fence. Just for simplicity's sake, we decided to cut it there. Finish that, save it, and switch back over to the operator. If we navigate back to our pin, which is now out in Klerksdorp, and we zoom deep enough in, you can see the outline of the alarm fence around that pin. So anytime that pin leaves that area, the asset will go into alarm. Speaking of which, we now need to go set up our alarm indication, because if I move this pin, I'm just going to update the simulation to move it out of the fence. You'll see the pin moves, it triggers an alarm because it's now exited the geofence, but we have no indication of that on the GIS quite yet. So I'm just going to restore that and acknowledge those alarms. Switch back to our designer. So the alarm indication in GIS is driven by a single Boolean value. We've done it this way because it allows us to look at an array of different alarm conditions and then consolidate them into a single, let's say, Marshall or expression agent, and then use that to drive the alarm indication on the map. In this example, I've set up my alarming to go through an expression agent that basically just takes the status alarms active bits of both the analog, the tank level analog, and the locations, the coordinate agents status alarms active bit. So if either of those are true, then we'll get an alarm. So I'll just browse in my expression. I think it's that one. Finish and save it. Pop the operator back up. So now, if we do the same thing and move the asset a bit, you'll see them immediately, because that alarm state was triggered, the pin now has a red border to indicate it's in an alarm state itself. You'll also notice in the tree that any parent node that has a child that is in alarm will be indicated by a red border, whereas the node that's in alarm itself will have a filled in red square around it, so you can navigate to your alarms. You can obviously also just filter to see only tags that are in alarmed. Again, more useful if you've got a bigger database here. So our next requirement was that we don't raise alarms when we know it's the user moving the asset. So this same alarm that I've got configured here, I've just conditioned on a digital value. Let me just restore this thing to inside its fence. Clear the alarm. So to indicate the fact that, let's say, while this asset is moving, our control room still wants to verify that it's allowed to move. There we can use the status tag configuration of the GIS to help us out. So the status tag is basically a method of adding one additional piece of graphic indication to the map, so you can see one more bit of data without leaving the overview screen. It's a very flexible, sort of loosely defined bit of functionality, because we wanted it to be able to be useful in as many situations as possible. So it does take some work, but you can accomplish a couple of different tasks with it. In this case, we just want to indicate that the transporting boolean or digital is in the on state. So what we go and do, if I just transition to the designer again, is we go to the setup. In the status tag box here, we just browse in for, I've got a digital called, let me find it quickly, tanker 2 transport, which is simply digital that the control room will set on and off when the customer calls in. Then in addition to that, we also need to set up how the map should react to that status. So that's done again on a per map level, and if you go into properties, you'll see there is a status colors a property that we want to edit. Let me just get it in here for you guys. That's basically what it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it say if the state of the status tag equals to 1, which is true, then we want to indicate that state by making the status tag indication area black. When that's false, we don't want to be bothered, so we'll set that to just the same color as our pins. Let's type that again. Okay, so we've got that set up. We'll save the form, head on over to our operator. Just find my tanker again. And so currently the status indication area is green because that digital is still in the off state. I've got it set up on my template to toggle the value of that state, so I'm just going to go quickly toggle that, and you'll see that the status indication area, which is this bottom triangle of the pin, gets set to black. So now when this asset moves around, we'll know it's allowed to by looking at that state. You'll see the others are just remaining the full green color. Just to see that in action, I'll move the asset out of the fence again, and you'll remember that we've got an alarm condition set up that says it shouldn't go into alarm when this digital is high. So there's how the status tags work. It's a quite flexible bit of functionality, but you have to keep in mind that those states at this point are always an equals condition, and also that for all the pins that are being displayed, each of their status tags will just return the first match it finds in that status color setup. So it's just something to be aware of. Then the last little bit that we're going to touch today is the use of descriptors. So descriptors in a droid are analogous to tags in general internet terms. We just couldn't use that name because obviously tags have their own meaning in SCADA. So a descriptor is basically just a free text field that you can associate with your object. If we go and take a look at it in the designer, get myself there. You'll see firstly that it's already got tanker here on the left hand side, and that's because I've configured the parent node in the tree to have a descriptor of tanker. That way I can just come down here and fill in 002 as the descriptor for this specific node. I'll just go back to tankers so you can see that as well. So as you go down the tree, it'll compound the descriptor with the whole parent line before it. So now we've got that descriptor set up, but what is the actual use? In this case, I've tried to stick to my tag naming convention with my descriptor naming. So that now gives me a reference to use in any sort of filtering or substitutions that I might want to do down the line. A cool way to use that in this example was to drive the descriptor value into our alarm windows filter property at the bottom. So you'll see I've got it set up that my selected pin's descriptor value gets pumped to a string format that basically is put together into a filter string, and that filter string gets driven to my alarm viewer here at the bottom. So if we switch back to our operator, let's get that asset back into the fence first. Then we want to trigger an alarm, so let's just trigger let's say the tank is running dry. Tanker 2, set that at 1500. It should go into alarm. And there we get the alarm in our alarm viewer. If I select something else here, let's go and select, well, anything really that where the descriptor doesn't match any of the alarms that are currently active, you'll see it clears out from the alarm list. So if I select my tanker, it'll bring back the alarms for that tanker. This is a good way to filter down to the relevant information to the asset that you're looking at. So if you've got a full alarm list with say 20 or 50 items in it, and that you can find an asset in alarm, let's say by filtering it out here, select it there, and then you can get more information about that alarm in your alarm viewer if you've got it set up that way. I think that's where we'll leave it for this one. It covers most of the functionality. We've left out topics like Cartesian coordinates and custom user layers, which we might address at some point in the future. I'd actually really like to see more guys using this. There's still a lot of instances of sites using, a static image of a map and placing the information on there rather than using something dynamic like this, which could really add a lot of value to those projects. And yeah, let's see if anyone's got any questions. Where's this? Chat. It looks like this chat control isn't working, but I can see the comments on YouTube. If anyone's got questions about any of the stuff we went through. Okay, no, I think looks like we're yeah, maybe we should start an Afrikaans channel as well for those. It looks like we don't have any real questions coming in. So I think that's where we'll call it for today. Thanks for taking the time. I hope I've given you guys some interest in maybe incorporating GIS into your project. And again, if anyone has questions or comments or things that they'd like to have introduced into the product, you must just let us know. All right, cheers.